So in this presentation, we're going to talk about athletic habit forming, how to overcome bad habits, where do they come from, and how are they formed. For the purposes of this presentation, let's say that we have a adolescent baseball player who has had some bad instruction mechanically in the past, and then he worked to overcome that. And the reason why he overcame it was due to a lack of performance. So there's the first thing. He was motivated to change his swing because it wasn't giving him what he wanted. So that's the first thing you have to understand about habit forming is motivation. Now this can apply to just about any sport, but it again, the athlete has to have a reason why. Why do they want to change? And so the reason normally is because of a lack of performance. So they're doing something. They're swinging a bat, a golf club, throwing a ball, whatever it is they're doing. It is not giving them the desired outcome. So they have a motivation to change the habit or the movement of the thing that they're doing, the athletic motion, let's say in this particular case of a baseball swing. They want to change because they're looking for a improved outcome, performance enhancement. That's what they're doing. So there's the first thing. Now the second thing is, what do I have to do in order to increase my performance? So there's a second thing is awareness. First off, they're motivated to change, but they may not know what to do. The second thing is education and awareness. How am I going to change? So there's the information part of change. There comes where the coach comes in or something. They have to have information to come to them that they trust can help them initiate the change that they want to incorporate into their swing or shot or whatever it is they're trying to do. So it has to make sense to the athlete. Why am I doing it? I know why. And now the information is, what am I going to do? Does that make sense? Is that what is going to help me get from point A to point B? And where is the information coming from? Is it coming from a trusted source? Is it coming from the internet? Hopefully it's more than just that, because what is the motivation of a person that's putting something on the internet? Why are they doing that? You see? And so the athlete has to be able to trust the source of the information. And does that make sense for them? And can they initiate that? This is one of the big controversies in method golf and method instruction, is that you have sort of an instructor that has gotten a big name because they have worked with some famous people, and then they bring in the public or anyone else, and then that instructor teaches everybody else, everyone, the same swing. It's a method that has worked for this very famous player. So then the other people who are not aware of what is really happening in this environment, they assume that that swing or that method can work for them, and it's just not true. So this is a thing that is called the method teachers, and it really doesn't work for anyone other than that particular player, because that particular player has got a particular frame, has got a particular range of motion, and then that instructional mode worked for that particular player. But you know what? It may not work for every player, and because of all the different variables that are involved in a complicated move like swinging a baseball bat or swinging a golf club. So you can take the fundamentals and then apply them to your swing, but trying to emulate a PGA Tour player's swing with a person who doesn't have the exact same build, exact same flexibility, it would be fruitless, and that would cause a lot of frustration. So here's where you got to have a little bit of the sporting IQ going into a situation when someone's trying to give you instructions. Say, well, I want you to swing this bat like Mark McGwire. Well, Mark McGwire may not have. You may not be able to swing a bat like Mark McGwire. So you can take the grip from him or take the plane from someone else and try to put it together yourself, but just saying that I want you to swing the bat like this player, I want you to swing a club like that player, just because they have a nice looking swing and it works for them, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So that's why having a high IQ as far as information and as far as your motivation going into a swing change is extremely important. You got to know what's the motivation of the instructor, and then is the information that they're giving you, is it going to work for you? Another factor, another variable in this puzzle, if you want to call it that, is fear. So let's say we're again, let's take this young baseball player who does well in one environment. Let's say that environment is when, he is playing up against a particular pitcher. This pitcher throws at a certain miles per hour. Then all of a sudden, the young man comes up against a pitcher that throws a lot faster. So then the player may think in their mind that throwing the ball faster, a faster pitched ball, is going to be harder to hit. Okay, so if that's the perception, that the ball is going to be harder to hit, then the pitcher or the batter, then the athlete who we're talking about here, has created an environment of fear. And so, of course, fear is the great motivator. And then that fear, that person going into that mode of operation of fear, all kind of negative things then can happen into a swing. They may even revert back to an old swing because the new is not have been habitualized yet, you see. So it may take several months and months in order to overcome a new move with diligent practice. But if the new move that is having some success is not completely habitualized, and then the player then perceives a fear response, there's something that's going to cause fear. What is that fear? Failure. If there is the chance of increased percentage of failure, then the fear response may revert back into something that's more comfortable, or in this case, something that has been habitualized. In this case, a poor swing. And so that's why it is extremely important that the athlete become aware of these things, of this particular environmental issue. In other words, here's a 450-yard par 4 against the wind. Then if the athlete says, oh my gosh, I got to really hit this hard, and this is a very difficult hole, well, that could trigger a fear response in the athlete. And then if that person is working on a new swing that has been effective, but it hasn't quite been habitualized yet, then they may go back to it. This may trigger the subconscious mind to go back into the thing that has been habitualized over a longer period of time, you see. And so if you can stay very cognizant of this awareness, right? This sense of awareness that, just because this person is pitching faster, that doesn't mean it's harder to hit. Because if that was the case, what would be the batting average of every Major League Baseball player that's facing a person that can throw it over 90 miles an hour? You see, most all Major League Baseball pitchers can throw over 90 miles an hour. I mean, that's why they're in the Major League. And you know what? Most all batters that are in the major leagues can hit a ball that's thrown at, but they don't see it as it being a harder task. All they've got to do is just put their bat on it. In fact, they don't even have to swing as hard, because all they got to do is make solid contact. The speed of the ball off the bat, that'll take care of getting the ball out of the infield, or many times over the fence. So it's the way you perceive this situation. It's not harder. It's just something that I've got to perhaps take my time and keep patient on this, and then watch for cues that the pitcher is going to be throwing a faster ball or something like that, right? So again, baseball IQ, being aware of tendencies from the pitcher. In golf, it would be being aware of yourself, that, hey, look, I don't have to hit this ball any harder. In fact, one of the most famous players in all of the game. Jack Nicklaus used to say, when I'm in the wind, I want to hit it softer. I don't want to hit it as hard in the wind. Well, that doesn't make any sense on the surface, but if you think about it, it does make sense, because the harder you hit it, the more spin on the ball, and then the more backspin on the ball, the more it'll get up in the wind, and then it won't go anywhere. So it's almost like it's a game of opposites, is an old adage in the game. And so this is one of them. So if a pitcher is pitching harder, you can probably, you might even think about it, this is actually going to be a lot easier, because all I got to do is just lay the bat out there. He just throws the same ball, over and over. All I got to do is just put my bat out there just a little faster, earlier, and the speed of his pitching will make the ball go even further. So it's a perception. It's the way you're thinking about this situation. Is it going to trigger a fear response, or perhaps it can trigger, it can make you feel like more confident. You see, so perception then would be the next step. Whenever you're making a change to a complicated thing like a baseball swing, or certainly a golf swing, then there are multiple moves within the swing. So it's not just like drinking a glass of water or something like that. I mean, there are multiple things that are happening within the swing. So if you're making fundamental changes to something big now, a big move, it's going to take some time to overwrite the habit form that has already been embedded into long-term memory. So this is the difference between short-term memory and long-term memory. So long-term memory is something that happens, you get something embedded in long-term memory after a long period of repetition, rote, repetitious practice over and over and over and over. And so there was a myth years ago saying it would just take 21 days. That's not true. And so it might take, depending on the complexity of the move, it may not take 10 days. But again, something complex is going to take a little bit more. Research has stated that it'd be 66 days or a couple of months, or perhaps even 6 months, 8 months, whatever it takes. However, it takes time. Nobody can do it in a short period of time. And the more complex the move, the more memory and more brain power it's going to take to get it stored into memory. So if it's one move, two moves, three moves, it might be 6 weeks just to get this move right here. It may be another 6 weeks to get this move. So we got 12 weeks going on just for that one little move. So then the athlete needs to understand, well, then if that's the case, it's going to take me a while to do this. I've got to have a lot of patience with myself. So patience, certainly with a young athlete, might be a challenging thing, because, they may not have a lot of patience. They want something immediately. But if they can understand in their mind that, look, this is going to take time, and I know why I'm doing it. I am highly motivated in order to make the change. The why part is part of the motivation, because I want to increase my performance. And then I've got the right information. I can trust the information. Now, how am I going to implement? Well, it's just a matter of practice. So in case, let's say in the baseball player, it would be in a hitting cage. So the player would go into a hitting cage and then start from scratch, maybe from the balls that are not being thrown as hard. And let's say the player is implemented a new swing and it's having some success. Then if the player did not have success with a faster pitch, then the self-talk, how is the player communicating with themselves when they're having success? What are they saying to themselves? More than likely, nothing, because the swing has already been habitualized. That's when you know that you have something in long-term memory, is because you don't have to think about it anymore. But let's say the thought pattern changes when the player is facing a pitcher that's throwing faster, or in the batting cage when the ball is coming faster. Then all of a sudden, if the language changes in the mind, oh my gosh, this is going to be harder. I'm not going to be able to perform the same. Then that kind of language right there is what can stand in the way of the habitualized motion, you see, because then that could trigger the fear. And then if the new motion isn't completely habitualized, the player runs the risk of going back into the comfortable place where he was before. So then the self-talk, or the perception, has to be addressed immediately. So you're facing a pitcher that you know is going to be throwing faster. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, this is going to be hard, or that pitcher's throwing it real hard, that kind of language then can trigger the fear response. This is going to be a tough hole. This is going to be a long hole. This is going to be, a wet, whatever. So that right there, that kind of language then can actually put the body in a fight or flight or freeze mode, the threat response. And so that right there could make the body more tense, just in the language that is triggering the threat response. So being aware before you get into the environment is a major, major key to overcoming the possible initiation of the threat response. Yeah, that guy's a fast pitcher, but you know what? Doesn't matter, because all I got to do is get my back around there a little bit quicker. I don't have to swing any harder, you see, and this is not a harder situation. All I got to do is just get my back around there a little bit quicker, and I'll be fine. Of course, self-talk, the visualization and self-talk are the most powerful tandem in any athletics. And so if you tell yourself what you want, and if you have the ability to do what you want, now if you can see it in your mind before all of that, and you couple that with the positive self-talk, you've got something in athletics that is so powerful, because now you have overridden the fear the fear that could be happening while you're in the batter's box, while you're on deck, while you're on the tee. So all of a sudden, the little voice is drowned out by instructional self-talk or motivational self-talk. At the same time, you're seeing it in your mind what you want to do. You just want to put the bat out there. You can actually see the ball coming in slow motion, just like that right there. So those two tools, those two mental skills training tools coupled together can completely drown out any of the fear talk that may have happened before you step foot in the environment. Two things I want to make you aware of as far as guarding against failure on this path is, of course, the lack of patience. That would be the first obvious thing. However, for a young person, actually, I guess for any person, the discouragement that they may have when they don't see this thing coming to fruition. So I guess that would come right back into the patience thing. So then they've been working on this thing day in, day out, hours and hours and hours, and it's not happening. And so they might lose patience with this thing. That's why people, they start out at the gym, and then within a couple of 3 months they don't go back, because they don't see it yet. They don't see any feedback. They're not getting enforcement. They're not getting the only enforcement they're getting is being sore. And so if they can reframe that, being sore is really the body's way of change, but it doesn't feel good. So they see that as negative reinforcement, something that they don't want. So that's avoidance behavior. I don't want to feel, I have a hard day and I'm going to go to a place where I'm going to feel even worse. I don't think so. But if they can look at it, 60 days down the road thinking, well, you know what, if I were to lose 10 pounds, 15 pounds or whatever, yeah, it would be worth it. But getting past those mental barriers, that is a challenge for people. And, there's a lot of stress in people's daily lives. And so if they are not properly motivated and they don't have patience, you know what? They're not going to do it for very long. They can't sort of see it. They can't see beyond this sort of pain barrier, and they certainly can't see it because they're not getting in the feedback that they hope that they would, that they're expecting. Same thing with the athlete. And so it was just going to take time for the new behavior, the new move, to override the old behavior, but it had all the pieces of the puzzle have to come into play. Why am I doing it? What's the motivation? Am I doing it? Do I trust the information? All of these things have to come in to play here. And so this is part of the sporting IQ and the awareness that the athlete must have in order to make a change. They've got to have it. Of course, the last thing is, certainly for the young athlete, is that if they're pressured, if there's any pressure on them at all, then the pressure could supersede their motivation. See, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so if a parent or a coach or the teammates or a scout, if they're being pressured to make a change, even if they trust the information, even if they want to do it because they want to go on to the next level, then the expectation of an improved performance due to the pressure of someone or in their circle that they either love or respect, that could cause the athlete to falter simply because of fear. They're not seeing it quickly enough, and they don't want to let this person down, they don't want to let that person down. And so then here we go right back into the fear. So it could be anyone that the person wants to impress or they don't want to let down. That's why it's important for parents, if the athlete is motivated to make a change, then it's important to communicate with the athlete. Do they want to make the change? Do they know how to make the change? Do they have the information to make the change? Do they understand how long it's going to take to implement and have the change go and override the current bad habit or long-term memory? And then at that point, do they have the patience to understand that, yeah, this is going to take some time, and you know what, I'm not going to let anyone down. I'm doing this because I want to do it for the right reasons. And what is that reason? Because it will help them become a better athlete. This is really just a scratching of the surface of what is memory, what is long-term memory, how is long-term memory stored, and what is the difference between short-term memory, how is it formed, and how is long-term memory formed. In fact, there was a very interesting study many years ago about a professional pianist, a man who was a professional piano player who had been struck down with encephalitis. And so the encephalitis destroyed his short-term memory. He couldn't remember 5 minutes, in the past, but you know what? He could play the piano. And so the encephalitis did not affect, or it did not destroy his long-term memory. It's amazing, how where memory is stored as opposed to short-term memory. And so this is the miracle and the marvel of the human brain. So this goes beyond positive self-talk. Once you get to that level of expertise in something, you don't even have to think about it anymore. And that's part of the thing that I do all the time with great athletes, is that they have mastered a move over a long period of time. It has worked for them, but they don't trust it enough, or they're afraid of doing something that they don't want to do, something that they're fearful of happening, and the language then gets in the way between the motion and the talent, you see, or wherever the motion is, wherever they have wherever the movement is stored in long-term memory. The negative language, the fear of doing something that they don't want to happen, many times stands in the way of the long-term memory, I call it the talent, and the execution. It's like a cop with a stop sign right there. So this is where people talk about, I'm get in the zone. When you hear people talk about this space, I am in the zone, normally you're not hearing any language, they're not describing anything. Many times what it is that they see it in their mind, their imagery or as pictures or something like that. There is no language at all, it's all feel at that point. That way the long-term memory or the talent then has a straight shot into execution. There's nothing here in the middle, nothing at all. It's all kinetic at that point, or it's about the feel. But a lot of people, certainly today, because of the pressure they put on themselves, or they're perfectionist or something like that, they have a fear of what they're trying to avoid. They call it avoidance behavior. They're motivated to avoid failure. They're so afraid of doing something wrong that they can't get out of their own head. They can't allow the long-term memory just to come on through. They can't trust it. And trust is, now we're talking about confidence. And when you're talking about confidence in athletics, that's the difference between a great athlete and a pretty good athlete. So hopefully you enjoyed this short presentation on how to change bad habits. It has to deal with memory, it has to deal with motivation, it has to deal with information, it has to deal with perception. You got fear that's involved, you have pressure. There can be a lot of confusion with this process if the athlete doesn't know what they're doing. They got to know why they're doing it. They got to have the right information to do it. And they got to have the right instruction coming at them with a lack of fear and or pressure. If they can do that and they have the patience to be able to persevere, then they can turn a bad habit into a winning habit.